Bagri. He's the head risk compliance and audit from Neo Solutions. For the panelists, we have Mr. Anand Naik. He's the co-founder and CEO from SecureTech. Mr. Srinivas Bhusarapu, CISO, Pension Fund Regulatory and Development Authority. Mr. Vinay Hariharan, CISO, CRIF, Highmark Credit Information Services, and Mr. Hiren Shah, President and Mentor, Square Solutions. I would request all the delegates to keep posting their questions in the chat box, and the panel will address selected few questions at the end of the sessions. Over to you, Mr. Bagri.
Hey, good morning, everyone. Rather, good afternoon, everyone. It has been a pleasure to welcome you all at the first edition of Pursuit 2021, Combating Financial Frauds with Technology. We have with us the most eminent personalities and expert in the cybersecurity space as the panelist for today's discussion. And, I am sure next 50 minutes, would be very, very insightful and interesting for all of us. So on the lighter side, please don't misinterpret it with the Shah Rukh Khan's speech in the Chak De India. The next 70 minutes is going to change your life. Yeah, but we'll try to do something in 15 minutes, which is really important, and will be helpful for your organizations. Yeah. So just to start, everyone will agree with me that COVID-19 pandemic has demonstrated the human capacity to be able to weather major unforeseen disruptions. And those that have been able to absorb and adapt to the challenges of COVID-19 pandemic successfully, are by definition called resilient. And this is the key theme for today's discussion, that how can we build cyber resilience in our respective organization, and we are going to discuss the strategies about it. For the audience who are new to cybersecurity universe, I would like to give you a high-level view and a very basic of what cyber resilience is, its core elements, and the impact on the global economy. So, you'll be surprised to know that last year, the cost of cybercrime was estimated $600 billion globally. And the average cost of a data breach was around $3.92 million. Enough to kill many small and medium-sized businesses, and definitely enough to shake a large organization as well. And apart from the financial cost, there is a huge, reputational loss also at risk. Recent cyber incidents have demonstrated the ability to penetrate even to a network of larger organizations. I would just like to remind you of few cyber attacks, happened in a couple of years. The most audacious to me was the attack way back in 2018 on the Cosmos Bank, which has shaken up the entire banking industry. And followed by a series of ATM hacking in Canara Bank and malware attack in UCO Bank. This is all major financial institutions, and there has been a lot of data breaches as well in the big organizations such as Air India, Domino's India. Recently, we have seen fintechs also becoming a part of the cyber attacks, such as MobiKwik and Upstocks, which is leading to a leak of financial and sensitive information of millions of people. You would all agree with me that cyber threat is borderless, and the capabilities of the attackers are constantly evolving, and they are readily scalable and increasingly sophisticated. Hence, there is a dire need to have a robust cyber resilience framework in every organization. Right. So now coming to what cyber resilience is, it is nothing but in simpler words, it is the ability of an organization to do whatever they are doing in spite of having adverse cyber events, or in spite of having cyber attacks. So now the question comes that how cyber attack is, or cyber security is different from cyber resilience. So in short, cyber resilience is has a broader scope, which includes cyber security plus the business resilience. So cyber attack is a process or a technology which will prevent cyber, your company from the attacks. Cyber security, and cyber resilience is adapting to the attack, and make the business up and running. Just to give you a simple example, that the human body has an inbuilt resilient system to fight common diseases. It is it is very important to make the cyber resilience a DNA of DNA of the organization, so that it can adapt to the cyber attacks, and the business can be up and running as quick as anything. So there are four major elements which we are going to discuss in detail with our panelists. So the major elements of cyber resilience are, first, prepare. Second is prevent. Third is respond. And finally, recover back and recover quick. So resilience is a mantra that allows an organization to endure security threats and cyber attack instead of critically falling. So we would be discussing building cyber resilience strategies with our expert panelist. With that, I would like to invite Mr. Hiren Shah. Hiren, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hey, Ray. So we would
Good
like to
afternoon.
understand the security resilience strategy for a large organization, considering that the implementation or the change in the existing framework, is not that easy. So, what are your views in that, and what are the recommendation for the large organization with the strategy standpoint? Yeah, over to you, Hiren.
Yeah, for large organizations, I'll go by the experience I've had in the last 10 of putting together a strategy which is meaningful in tackling cyber resilience. Now, one part of that is having a disaster recovery or business continuity plan, but I'm not going to talk too much about that. That's a different kind of subject, probably. One can go into detail of that, but I'm going to talk a little bit more about actually how do you build cyber resilience within your platforms or infrastructure that you are delivering to your customers. And from an application security perspective, it's important to lay some principles. Like in application security, the principle that we typically ask our customers to adopt is treat all input as malicious. Right? Now build your application security architecture. And you will see that you will probably pay a lot of attention to how you are building validations in your applications. Similarly, when you are building cyber resilience, you have to go with the principle of saying breach will happen. Right? Now, once you adopt that principle, that breach is going to happen, then you will actually start thinking about how am I going to put alerting mechanisms. Because what you basically want to do with that hypothesis is that I want to know the moment the breach happens, right? What we are not seeing today in the architecture that we evaluate is the thinking around this at the time of design. So, if I take 3 points that I would like to highlight in terms of establishing a sound cyber resilience, the first one is that you embed the cyber security within the design of whatever you are building, whether that's an enterprise platform or whether that's just one solution, one app, doesn't matter. You need to think about how am I going to get alerted if there is a breach? What kind of monitoring I need to put? And for all of these, you'll have to think about what is normal operations and what is abnormal operations. So there's a lot of these basic thinking that you will have to put when you are building a sound cyber resilience strategy. For example, data security, right? A lot of times when there is discussion on data security, it remains very focused on encryption. Are we going to encrypt our data? Are we not going to encrypt our data? What algorithm? But that is not the only challenge. The challenge is around, okay, from a cyber resilience perspective, let's say put a disaster recovery mechanism and you use data replication, right? If your data breach happens, it is very likely that whatever damage has happened to the data is going to happen to the DR site also. How are you going to manage that, right? So number one is actually creating an architecture which considers all of these issues. Two is actually something that we feel very strongly about is not to mix compliance and security. We see that a lot of times, security folks are busy trying to meet with compliance requirements, right? So your entire cyber security strategy gets driven by, compliance. Whereas what you need to do, especially in large organizations, especially banking or telecom, e-commerce, you you segregate these two roles. There is a very important role the boards have to play there. To put a governance structure where they say security guys have to focus on securing the platforms, the networks, the data, the applications. The compliance has to be handled by a different set of people. And the third is, especially for the CISOs, is that we like to, what we have seen in very smart security organizations is that they are learning something. The teams are learning something. They're doing something new, every day. Some smart strategies we have seen in terms of resilience is use of honeypots. Putting tables in databases which in normal course will never be touched. But if there is a breach, it's very likely those tables will get touched and you will get an alert. So what I'm saying is you will have to think smart because there is no silver bullet. We have to get out of the blinking lights phenomenon. Tools and products are not going to solve. They have their space, they have their role, but how do you put all of these together and put in a strategy which is going to work when such events happen? Is what you have to think about.
Okay, thank you, Viren. So some nice input that the compliance, has to be separated from the security folks, which is not happening, and a lot of people, today are mixing both things with respect to, if I talk about the cloud infra also, so a lot of things are getting mixed. So now we want to have a, I would like to call Mr. Anand Nayak to understand that, from the strategy perspective, how should the fintech and the payment companies, including wallets and all, should behave, and what should be the strategies of these companies? Since there is a lot of money involvement, and there are multiple third party also, getting in picture, in terms of the money movement. So yeah, over to you, Anand.
Yeah, thanks, Vivek. So let me start with the premise that Hiren just built on, which is organizations today need definite visibility on what's happening within their environment. So the first paradigm that people will have to look at, businesses will have to look at, fintech companies will have to look at is, how do I get visibility to all my data? Whether it is coming through telemetry, whether it is coming through events, whether it is coming from applications, middleware, how do I get complete visibility of what's happening within my environment? The second tenet is, once I have the visibility, do I have the capability to detect and prevent threats from happening within the organization? Whether these threats are originating from outside through hackers or malicious actors, or whether the threats are originating from within the organization and through an disgruntled person within the organization or an innocent person to go and fall victim to external attacks. So how do I go and detect and prevent this, whatever malicious activities that happen? And the third tenet is to look at, like Kiran mentioned, security and attacks, it is not a question about whether it will happen, it's a question about when it will happen. And as it happens, do you have enough capability to go and respond? So if you were to look at these three core premises of how do I get visibility of the environment, how do I detect and prevent, and maybe proactively respond to these threats, and how do I ensure that my response mechanism is built in? If this were the questions that one needs to address from a fintech security architecture perspective, I would kind of put together a 4x3 construct to this entire thing. The four core elements of the architecture framework would be starting with a policy and a governance risk compliance framework, whether it is managed by one team, whether it is managed by an independent team. Organizations need to look at what is expected from the rest of the organization, people, processes, technologies that are deployed, and what is the regulator expecting out of us. So the first layer of that architecture will be the GRC and the GRC framework. The second layer of the architecture is the information layer, which is, what am I doing with data, whether this data is residing at some devices or endpoints, whether this data is in motion, so I'm doing some transactions, or whether the data is sitting in some cloud or some network that I'm interacting with my supply chain and my vendors. So what is my information governance architecture? How am I protecting against my critical information? And I think by now all of us know that not all information is created equally, and not all information needs to be treated equally. So how do you go and create a priority with that architecture of the information layer? The third layer that one needs to focus on is the infrastructure layer, which is all the elements of a hybrid cloud or a data center that I have, or legacy applications that are sitting in the data center, or people working from home in today's scenarios. So devices moving out of your perimeter, and people accessing it through public networks in today's scenario again. So the entire infrastructure layer. So the three layers that architecture that you need to look at is the GRC, information layer, infrastructure layer. And the fourth tenet there would be to look at overall security management, which is basically tying these three layers to bring visibility, tying these three layers to make sure that you have detection, prevention, and proactive response, or a reactive response mechanism created around it. So if these were the four architecture layers, these architecture layers address three stakeholders. The three stakeholders are, first, the business itself. At the end of it, I want to know as a business owner, and all of us on the call and everybody in the business world would want to know what is the risk from security and what is the risk from IT that they are carrying. So getting business visibility of what is happening in security is very important. The second is all the devices, whether these devices in a traditional fintech what would mean a desktop, laptop, server, cloud deployment, or in the new world would mean IoT and mobile devices and platforms that people are interacting with. You need to know what is happening for these four architecture components that I mentioned earlier from a perspective of my devices, and what is happening on, again, this entire four architecture per components with reference to my people, whether these people are internal employees of the organization, vendor contract employees that come into my organization, or the supply chain that I am dealing with. So to summarize, the architecture needs to have a 4x3 construct, like I mentioned, ITGRC, information layer, infrastructure layer, and the management layer, cutting across business visibility, ability to detect and respond, and ability to create a resilient response framework that cuts across people and their own devices and components that they use within the organization.
Thank you, Anand. So, as you rightly said, it is a matter of when rather than whether it will happen or not, or if it will happen or not. So we need to take care. We need to understand that it is a matter of time that all the organization will at some point of time gonna have some kind of attack. And as Hiren also said, that you need to consider all input as malicious. So so very well correlated. So I think it is a great input for our audience. So now, yeah, moving to Srinivas now. Srinivas, you have been a part of a lot of government organization, also a part of NPCI. So what is your take, or what would be your strategy with respect to that government organization is following, and is it different from the private organization? Considering the scale of the government organization is really huge. So over to you to throw your views on it.
Thank you, Vivek. Thanks for giving the context to to make strategies for the government as well as the private. First, what we should understand is if you look at the government or private sector, because the private sectors are also part of the government. So that is a major thing. And where if you look at the strategies related to the government organizations like public sectors or government entities, so the two categories will be there. One is the government department itself, and second is a public sector entities. So if you, and a third one is a private sector. So in these, all these are part of government. So now if you're coming to the present context related to the cyber resilience, so in government sector is a critical thing. Anything is going on attacks or any breaches or any kind of thing is happening, we should be very careful in that. And cyber resilience is very important over there. As you defined it, how quickly you are going to come back in case of common service centers, in case of power systems, in case of railway systems, in case of transportations, airlines, whatever it is, because a lot of lives are linked to it. So there, the aspect to come back to the normal stage should be it should become without any delay. It should be transition to the next level. So that kind of resilience we should have to present in the government systems. So in order to get that kind of resilience, what kind of strategies government is going to have? So if you look at the vision of that, if you look at information and cybersecurity policy 2013 or strategy coming in 21 to 25, so vision will be safe first. So how many lives are impacted and how it's going to be there. So safe, and another is the security of it. So what kind of data are there, what kind of financial implications are there, those kind of things we should have to consider. And another one is the trust among the various e-governance systems or whatever systems you are using. That trust should be there. And another aspect is a resilient and vibrant. There should be self comeback and those kind of things. That kind of system should be there. To get these kind of things, there is a strong collaboration with the private PPP models, and strong research and development, strong product development should be there. Strong services from all the aspects should be there. So that's where if you look at any sector, so multiple people will come together. If you take a power sector itself, so there is a lot of load balancers, or the transmission lines are there, generation stations are there. Now everything is integrated with the ICT systems. So in order to make that resilience of that systems, because there are billing systems are there, there's a load balancing systems are there are ERP systems are there. So in order to manage all these things, right from the capacity building and board level capacity and appointment of CISO. So these are the very critical points they'll take into the consideration. And in addition to this, if you look at a lot of products, whatever we are using in banking or insurance or fintechs, all are we are getting from other place. So in that context, what government is also proposing is we should have the indigenous products and services in order to avoid any kind of threats or breaches are there. So we can avoid with that. So that kind of indigenous products are, has been encouraged. And another one is a national cyber risk registry. Also, there as a part of strategy, they are building the registry for that. So whenever they are building that, like if you look at National Critical Information Infrastructure Protection Center or Computer Emergency Response Team, so those are research areas are going to get a lot of insights from other sets across the globe, and they are sharing with all the PSUs, and they're sharing best practices out of them, and they're doing a lot of work in that area. And there is a analysis among them, root cause correction analysis in case of anything is happening. And a regular threat intelligence, national threat exchange system is also has been built. So like that, continuous product development as well as service level insights, they are getting into it. And how you are going to build the capacities regularly, they're doing a lot of work in the capacity building for the CISOs and CIOs and board level people. So because now board also liable for the a lot of things in the cyber security. So how to go about the investment for the IT as well as cyber security. Maybe yeah, you're going to see in the cybersecurity strategy, there is a clearly defined that you should have to invest 8 to 10% for the cybersecurity. That kind of guidelines also is going to come. So government will think in all the aspects, like a workforce related, how to build the more workforce. That's what cyber pearls, new startups also has been taken. And cyber insurance. So how to take the cyber insurance, especially if you look at cyber insurance. Now we have 4 to 5 products across India. So we got the product, but how to assess that? So what scoring we should have to take, then based on that how we are going to go for the underwriting of that premium. So once I got the premium is done, so in case of some incident happen over there, how you're going to assess and give the claim for them. So these are the challenges also there. So in that area, a lot of capacity building is also happening across India for all public sector enterprises like telecom and power systems, e-governance, everywhere. Government is doing a lot of effort. These are one of the strategic point. And another important area is education at every level. Now if you look at the government is not one person. So you can think of the citizen, you can think of the businesses, you can think of the departments. So at every level we should have the understanding of the threats and cyber security related awareness should be there. So that kind of awareness has been created at every level, right from the common citizen, from the business supply chain level. If I am having strong relationship with the vendors or solution providers, then only I can have a tight coupling and I can achieve the cyber resilience in any of the systems. So that is the education part. They're taking like anything, a lot of investments also coming up. And there are also a strategic point for the investment from the other countries. FDA also has been taken in the cyber security. And they're establishing a lot of clusters across India. Like if you look at Hyderabad, Hugs cluster is also establishing for the cyber security. And another area is sectorial CERTs also established. Computer emergency response teams has been established sector level. Like a financial sector is there, it is coming up with a CERTFIN. And power sector is there, there is a CERT for the power system, there is CERT for the strategic enterprises. So like that, in order to strengthen the cyber security and get the cyber resilience next level of the cyber security, a lot of these kind of strategic points has been taken. And creating sound threat exchange among the critical infrastructures has been taken into the consideration. And another one is having time now.
Yeah, please continue.
Another important thing is when we are doing the in normal approach, any incident happened, planned approach, planned things are fine. But in case of natural calamities or unexpected things happens, how to handle is the biggest question mark among the all the stakeholders in the PSU sectors or in private sectors. So at the time, how to perform that kind of cyber crisis management plan and tabletop exercises and real time when disaster recovery is happening, what kind of things we should have to take and how we are going to contact and escalate those kind of capacities also we should have to build within the organizations. So that is also one of the strategy has been defined in the government as well as the extended for the private sector also. So these kind of new things in the national cyber risk repository also they have established, and any incident happens immediately. It has been reported to the CERTIN and NCIPC, and regular advisory has been released to them to secure their things. So MHA as well as the MHA, CERTIN and NTRO, all these are doing a tremendous job as a part of a strategic thing in the cyber security and cyber resilience in the government sector.
Yeah, thank you, Srinivas, for your update on what, how government is behaving and adapting to the cyber resilience. It is pleasing to know that, a lot of our lives are directly impacted, with the security of the government and public sector companies. And, it is pleasing to know that, we are in safe hands. Moving to, Mr. Vinay from CRIF. So Vinay would like, your opinion on the strategies that can be applicable for small and medium sizes of organization, and how can we overall fine tune the existing strategies which are already prevailing in the company. Over to you, Vinay.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thanks, Vivek. So clearly, what I feel is it is very important for us to strengthen our perimeter defenses. And the second is very clearly define what is our data protection strategy or business continuity, which is many places I see it is. And the last one, what I feel is very important is to strengthen the last line of defense as well, that is people. So we must actually focus on providing adequate cyber training to people. Look at the increase in the overall attacks. I mean, you just mentioned in your introductory, the attacks overall has increased in this pandemic, and it is very important to maybe train people to understand and be more vigilant in terms of reporting of incident and all of that. When it comes to execution, I feel organizations should only adopt the zero trust framework, which essentially means you can't be trusting anyone. And when you have that kind of framework adopted, you will be able to strengthen your overall cybersecurity framework as well.
Thanks, Vinay, for your input. So, yeah, so just to give you a glimpse of what RBI is doing, they are also taking it very seriously. As you rightly said, Vinay, that pandemic has increased the number of cyber attacks. So the regulators are also trying to make the cyber resilience strategy as a main part of the smaller organizations as well, including the cooperative banks and NBFCs. With that, they have recently issued a vision document for 2023, especially for the urban cooperative banks. And it is more likely to be extended to NBFCs. So they have a very fancy name to it. It's called GUARD, GUARD. So these are the GUARD, the five principles that the RBI has given, and which is majorly telling that the board has to invest money in technology. Second, regulators have to build a framework for mandatory reporting so that it is followed. Third is, and the most important key ingredient is collaboration between multiple companies. And finally, developing the skill set as what Srinivas and confirmed. So this is what regulators are doing with respect to cyber resilience strategies overall, with respect to multiple organizations, be it big or small. So now moving into, the topic that, how the threat has changed or evolved in the COVID-19 pandemic, and what should be the strategies to deal with it, especially in the cloud environment. So, I would like Hiren to, give us some overview on the strategies with respect to COVID-19 pandemic and the threat evolution.
Yeah, thanks, Vivek. So, COVID-19, if anything, has probably accelerated cloud adoption. The apps which were so far behind the perimeter or within your own internal networks had to be exposed out, right? Because you wanted people to be able to work from home. This is probably the one big change that has happened in the infrastructure. Now, cloud adoption itself is a very or cloud security itself is a very complex area in terms of finding a security strategy. Which model of cloud should you adopt? It will all be dependent on what your business case is. When we see organizations transitioning from in-house hosted infrastructure to cloud, we see several challenges, and the most important of that is that cloud adoption comes with it itself some changes, fundamental changes in architecture. They are bound to happen. Adoption of technologies like containerization, right? These are typically driven if you do cloud adoption, right? Whether you are going to do a public cloud like AWS or Azure or Google Cloud, or you are going to have maybe a private cloud with a hosting agency. These are questions that you will have to go into. Now, cloud architecture itself is complex from what you typically have in houses, because it granularizes the entire, breaks down the entire components of your IT architecture into very small pieces. You have to write rules for network access, right? Between different containers, for example, right? So the configuration challenge on the cloud is multifold when you compare it to what it would be in running an IT infrastructure shop, within, let's say, a data center or your own offices. So this is where the challenge is to, how are you going to do the transitioning? What is that architecture look like on the cloud? Where should my security architecture focus? What my challenges are in terms of configuration management. All of that, it gets extrapolated into multifold controls that you have to now look into.
Yeah, right, Hiren. So, Anand, your views on how the traditional strategy will work in the COVID-19, or do we need to change the strategies with the change in threat, especially related to COVID-19?
Yeah. So thanks, Vivek. Two fundamental changes have happened if you look at the last 18 months, and probably both of them are going to stay for a longer time. From an IT perspective, people and their devices have become the new perimeter. So whether you are hosting out of cloud, whether you are hosting out of your own data center, legacy co-hosting solutions, the moment you are accessing corporate IT, you are accessing through a perimeter which the corporate IT was not aware of, or was configuring their security only for limited set of users, which used to be defined as traveling users, which usually made up the C-suite of the organization and senior managers. Suddenly, overnight in March last year, in our context in India, that changed to every single employee, every single vendor who has need to access IT system. So all the architectures, all the designs that you had kept in mind, thinking that I'm going to control the perimeter, put very secure, strong security guards on it, suddenly had to be reconfigured. So people and their devices have become the new perimeter, which one needs to clearly, therefore, re-architect the security solution there. And whether you adopt zero trust, like one of the panelists mentioned, or whether you adopt any other mechanisms, this is a direct change that will have an impact on how compliance is viewed, how efficiencies are viewed, and how security is handled. Therefore, The second big change that has happened, what this first change has brought in, is the boundary between corporate data and personal data residing on these devices, and access to those devices is suddenly changed. Earlier, because you had control over the perimeter, and you people were mostly working out of a known environment, you had a good control over what is installed on those machines, what applications are running, what kind of data is getting generated, and therefore what you are managing from an information security perspective. The moment you are taking this machine into unknown territory, which is somebody's home or some coffee shop or some place, right? That boundary shifts, and suddenly this boundary between corporate data and personal data starts becoming blurred. So all the policies, all the security tools that I have put to protect information, keeping in mind a defined perimeter and keeping in mind a defined user and their system, is suddenly changed to issues on the privacy side of the house. And with the new data privacy bill getting tabled next week when the parliament session starts, um, it's a serious concern for a lot of organizations, because a lot of organizations have made this statement that we will consider working from home for a long foreseeable future, and these efficiencies and that efficiencies. Be very interesting to see um, when this data privacy bill gets cleared and becomes a law. uh, how are you going to treat these devices and people that are working from remote locations and working from home, and what kind of privacy policies you're going to apply, because now you are subjected to an Indian law as and when the bill gets cleared. So I see these two fundamental shifts that have impacted, leading to a rethink of the overall security architecture. However, the basic tenets which I started in my previous conversation, of businesses wanting full visibility of all data, businesses wanting to know what to detect, what to prevent, and businesses wanting to create a robust response mechanism, doesn't change. So the core tenets of visibility, detection, prevention, and response does not change. And now you have people who are big new perimeter, devices who are the new perimeter, and privacy, and therefore data access, which has become a big re-architecture need for everyone. So that's the new architecture paradigm that one needs to deal with from a security perspective, in my opinion.
Yeah, thanks, Anand. That's a critical paradigm shift that's going to happen, and we are eagerly waiting for the data privacy bill, because it's going to change the organization is currently working. So let's see how it goes. Yeah. So I would like to call Vinay. Vinay, what are your views? Amid the digital transformation that has happened, in a lot of organizations post the COVID-19 pandemic. So, what are your views on the strategies being changed, and what do you suggest to the viewers? Yeah.
Sure. So, I mean, while we cybersecurity, obviously, breaches is one thing which comes on top, and be it phishing, ransomware, social engineering, network brute force, or any of that, and obviously that has just increased in this pandemic. In fact, if you see the data breach or data available on dark web or deep web, it's really scary, and which is why every organization should enforce a strong cybersecurity practice to avoid any disaster as well. It is very important that the review mechanism of your strategies also the organization revisit on I would say, a frequency should be decreased. So the typically which I see is organization the standard ways as a part of compliance. At least a year we have to look at the strategy and people look at it as a compliance. But I feel it should be reduced. The cybersecurity resilience framework maybe should be looked upon maybe quarterly or a half yearly. At least the frequency should decrease definitely. And that is why, I mean, also the important part is that the CROs and CISOs also closely work with the management, because enforcing a lot of policies, cybersecurity related policies, needs a top-down approach, and that is the only way it works. So, and to your second question is, I strongly feel adoption of SaaS offerings should be encouraged more in every organization, and lot of I would say organizations have moved their workload on cloud, and rather than leaving the cloud service provider to manage the security by themselves and just relying on them, I feel that zero trust. We should actually manage our the cloud environment, be it public cloud, but we should be responsible of taking security measures or making sure that there is enough security on the cloud, irrespective of being a private or a public. And obviously, the zero trust, I would apply it there as well. So for CSC. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Vinay. So the zero trust policy is the mantra.
Yeah.
For cyber resilience, is what you understand. So now quickly moving to one of the questions which our viewers have raised, and meanwhile, while we address to that question, I accept. If somebody wants to raise any other questions from the viewer, just they can enter in the chat box, and we will try to answer those questions. So Srinivas, the question to you is that what advice would you give to a CISO or security professional on how to deal with budgetary challenges and justify the ROI at the time of when businesses are hitting hard? Over to you, Srinivas.
Yeah, basically, cybersecurity budget is the biggest challenge, because as a user I've seen, as a IT department I've seen, as a security expert also I've seen. People will think we should not invest into the cybersecurity. That is a mantra they have. So in order to avoid this, what we have started is we given GAN to the board level people first, chairmen and board level people, because if they know the criticality of that, then they can allocate the budget. That's what we have started, because based on the feedback from the CISOs and CIOs, we understood you're giving a lot of capacity to us, but the only problem is in the banking or insurance or any sector, what they said is we are facing budgetary issues. So what we have done is we have taken some capacity building programs for the director level and thing, and we told that what is the importance of the cyber security and how it is going to helpful in this, because it is, people will think it's a cost center. It is not revenue center. Always people will think the revenue center, they're ready to invest in more and more. But if you showcase that in the form of it is also revenue, but in other way, if you lost something in case of any issues or any kind of thing, it's more than what you invested. If you invest 10% initially, it will save a lot of things. But if you're not invested, if it something hacks or something happens, it more than 100%. So that kind of it, if you think in the financial aspect, if you think in the reputational aspect, so this is a revenue. So that kind of things we have been given, and there is a liability for the directors also now. Directors liability also has been given. You should be capable, and you should allocate the budget, specific budget for the cyber security. Then only it will be saved from endpoint devices to the data centers, or whatever IT assets you have, critical assets you have. Everywhere we should have these strong cybersecurity related products and services. So that's where we have been increasing the capacity of the people. That is a mantra to increase the investment and make secure and safe transaction. And especially if it goes to the any threats, then court cases, then reputation damage, then all these to happen. So that kind of things we were given capacity to them. And in addition to this if you look at the non-compliance related to the regulators. Now regulators, as you mentioned, RBI has been released the GUARD framework, and urban banks framework, and cloud framework all has been released, and there also it has been mentioned clearly you should have cyber liability insurance, you should have these kind of products at every level. If you look at GUARD or urban
Srinivas, in the interest of time, I think we have this thing. So a quick view on justifying the ROI from Anand and then from Hiren. How to justify the ROI in the in this field.
So two ways one can look at an ROI here. One is obviously the cost of data breach and all the cost of non-compliance and all of these things that are available, enough public data available on it. But I think a better innovative way to look at ROI would be how these tools can be, instead of being treated as support elements, how these tools, all security tools, can be treated as enhancing productivity by enhancing trust. How can it be translated into trust elements rather than support elements is an important shift. And there are enough, again, tools available from industry product vendors, industry consultants, who allow you to really start translating the value and bringing in that trust. For example, you do not want a big bank's name. You mentioned a few of them in the opening remark. I'm pretty sure if I am the CEO and chairman of that bank, my name, I would not want you to flash it off on this conversation. And therefore, building the trust element is an important aspect of looking at ROI rather than getting into a lot of other aspects. So those are the 2 points from my perspective.
Yeah, thank you. So I think we have reached the limit of our session time. Hiren, sorry, your views, please.
Yeah, I will just give you one anecdote from my past when I was a CIO. 19 years ago, when I took over the role, cyber security was not a big thing, right? But because security became part of my governance portfolio, I just wanted to make sure that are we safe? The only thing that I had at the time exposed on the internet was a mail server running Lotus Notes, okay, which was considered a very secure mailing platform. But just to satisfy myself, I got one of these ethical hackers to say, okay, go and do a dipstick. Okay, go and hit it, see what you can find. 2 days later, this guy calls me and he says, I think I have enough to show you. So I call him to my office, I gather my infrastructure team. And the first thing he shows me is saying, is this your server password? Right? That is the presentation I took to my management. And I said, ab mere ko iske liye paisa chahiye. I can tell you for the next 8 years, I never had any challenge getting funding for cyber security or security related work. In fact, the management was always asking me, are we spending enough? So I think maybe a good starting point is to give your management that view as to what can happen if you don't do this.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, perfect. So thank you for your expert advice and sparing time for this important and insightful discussion. Now we are coming to an end of the session. So over to you, Shivani.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Bagri. Thank you so much. Thank you all our speakers for making this discussion so engaging. And special thanks to our audience and our sponsor, our bronze partner Onfido and our knowledge partner EY. Please stay tuned for other exciting discussions. We are signing off. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks a lot.
Bye.